Hey, we're in this series that we titled Maybe, right in the middle of it. And we're talking about some things, how God will take a maybe. You know, faith is, if we're 100% certain, that doesn't take faith. It's when we're not quite sure that we have to take that step of faith. And so that's part of it. And we're going to continue talking about some of those things today. And it's been a fun series for me anyway. We've talked about in this series, we've talked about God and we've talked about hearing his voice. We've talked about his ways. We're talking about how do I know that this is of the Lord? How do I know this opportunity is from the Lord? How do I know this is the direction the Lord wants me to go? And, excuse me. I want to start with the key. We're going to have a lot of scripture this morning. We'll throw it up on the screen for you so you can keep up with it. And but here's our key verse for today. It's found in 1 Samuel chapter 14, verse 6. Jonathan said to his young armor bearer, "Come, let's go over to the outposts of those uncircumcised men. Perhaps the Lord will act on our behalf. Nothing can hinder the Lord from saving, whether by many or by few." Today I want to talk about what I'm going to call 50-50 faith. 50-50 faith. And I believe it'll help those maybe who are here who are having a hard time making a decision. We asked you last week, how many of you are in the midst of you got a big decision to make? Well, if you're having a hard time with that, I think this will help you. I'm trying not to cough. Okay, let me just be upfront and honest right now, just to kind of let you know this. As a pastor, at this point in my journey as a pastor, I've never been, I don't want this to sound wrong, I've never been less certain, yet at the same time, more confident, all at the same time. Does that make sense? I've never been less certain, yet more confident, all at the same time. It's kind of a strange thing how when we give up our need for certainty, then we can gain a true confidence that's independent of our circumstances, our situation, our surroundings. In this series, we've used some Old Testament passages to give us some context, and we're going to do that again today. Context for the way that transition and how transition creates opportunity for us to trust in God. Today, in the transition we're going to look at today, King Saul, who's the king of Israel, he's kind of lost his way. He's kind of got to the point where he's trying to use God as a mechanism to get what he wants. He's kind of like trying to use God almost like his magic genie to get what he wants. And in the process of doing that, he loses the ability to hear the voice of the Lord. And when that happens, he ends up wasting time, wasting effort, wasting energy, wasting resources. So in this situation here, and because he's done this, the Philistines, who are their enemy, have Saul and his men surrounded. They have the people surrounded. It's to the point where it's just inevitable. When are the Philistines going to attack? When are they coming after us? People are trying to hide. People they're hiding in caves. They're hiding in the woods, in the thickets, anywhere they think they can hide. Some of them are even fleeing to neighboring countries, trying to get away. And so that's the situation that we're in. And you know, at times we all have those times when we find ourselves hiding. We hide in things, and we hide in mindsets, and we hide in patterns, and we hide in isolation. We hide away from life sometimes. We hide away from people. We hide from risk. We hide from opportunity. So this is kind of the situation, kind of sets the background for where we're at with this situation in 1 Samuel. Chapter 13, verse 23, we read, "Now a detachment of Philistines had gone out to the pass at Michmash." It's worth pointing out that the enemy attacks at the pass. He attacks at the pass. He attacks at the place of transition. He attacks at that place from what we knew, and we're going to what we don't know. From where we were, where we are to where we're going. If he knows if he can set up an ambush at the pass, he can keep us from moving forward. So we're going to go to chapter 14. This is verse 1. One day, Jonathan, son of Saul, said to his young armor bearer, "Come, let's go over to the Philistine outpost on the other side." But he did not tell his father. Be careful who you talk to, because we have to be careful about that, because we don't want to talk. If we talk to the wrong person about what God is doing on the inside of us, we have to be careful who we tell that, because the impressions that God is stirring on the inside of us, if we tell it to the wrong person, if we tell the wrong person those right ideas, those things that are going on, then it's easy for that idea to be squished. Okay? It's easy for that idea to be wiped out, erased, before it ever even has a chance to birth itself in our life to what God wants to do. So we have to be careful who we share those things with. Verse 2, Saul was staying on the outskirts of Gibeah under a pomegranate tree in Migron. With him were about 600 men, among whom was Ahijah, who was wearing an ephod. He was the son of Ichabod's brother, Ahitub, son of Phinehas, the son of Eli, the Lord's priest in Shiloh. No one was aware that Jonathan had left. On each side of the pass that Jonathan intended to cross to reach the Philistine outpost was a cliff. One was called Bozez and the other Seneh. Bozez, by the way, means slippery. Seneh means thorny. So it's kind of like one of those deals where we realize all of a sudden, I guess really nobody told me this was going to be easy. Nobody said it would be easy. God didn't promise that this was going to be convenient and that doing his will and the Christian life was going to be easy or convenient. See, we have to stop thinking that positive proof that we're in the will of God is that everything feels good and everything's going smooth and that everyone understands and everything's just going to fall into place for us. No. He had to go through a thorny place. He had to go through a slippery place. He had to go through a place that was tough, a place that was uncomfortable, a place that was inconvenient. It was an uncertain place that he had to deal with. And just because I'm in an uncertain place, though, that doesn't mean that I don't have a certain purpose. And one of the proofs that we're in his will is, if we're in his will, there's probably going to be some opposition. The devil's probably going to come against us if we're trying to do things for the Lord. If I'm not doing anything for God, well, he doesn't care. So that's always kind of a red flag. Keep going, verse 5. One cliff stood to the north toward Michmash, the other to the south toward Geba. Jonathan said to his young armor bearer, "Come." Or here's our key verse we've already read. "Come, let's go over to the outpost of those uncircumcised men. Perhaps the Lord will act in our behalf. Nothing can hinder the Lord from saving, whether by many or by few." And I'm so thankful to God for that one little word that's in there. God, thank you for including that. Not the one where he said, "Let's go over," or "nothing can hinder." No. That one little word that I highlighted there where he said, perhaps the Lord will act on our behalf. Because that word, when I hear that, it gives me certainty for my situation. It gives me certainty. It helps me in my insecurities. It helps me in my wondering, my impossibilities, my uncertainty. It gives me hope that even in the midst of making progress in my life, look, there are going to be times, there are going to be those moments when I have great faith. But I may turn around 5 minutes from now and be overcome by great fear. I mean, that's just how it is. And so that's how I appreciate that word being put in there. Perhaps, maybe, perhaps. Verse 7, "Do all that you have in mind," his armor bearer said. "Go ahead. I'm with you heart and soul." Jonathan said, "Come on then. We will cross over toward them and let them see us." "Come on then. Since you're on board with this, since you got my back, since you're talking like you're with me all the way, come on then. Come on, since you want to do it too. Come on. Come on then. Come on, since you don't think I'm crazy for trying to go over there toward the enemy and showing ourselves, even though it's probably not going to turn out very good, even though we're outnumbered. Come on then, let's do it. Come on, since you don't have any more common sense than I do, we're going to walk right up to the enemy's camp. How much sense does that make? Come on, let's do it. See, sometimes we need someone to help us to try to find God in it, even though our plan may not sound like the best plan out there. And we need that just so we don't stay stuck, so we don't stay stagnant, so we don't stand still, so that we're moving. Jonathan says, come on then. His armor bearer says, go ahead then. Well, come on then. Yeah, go ahead then. Come on then. Let's do it. Yeah, and they're pumping each other up. They're probably chest bumping and all that kind of stuff. Because, see, the thing is, the people who should have had the faith had been overtaken by fear. And the next part helps us as we're trying to figure out God's will. Everyone has a way to try to figure out what the will of God is. We all have a way that we make decisions that will be to our advantage. We all have a way that we try to discern wisdom, because we can't always get it from a book or from an internet or from a class. Here's what I figured out. I figured out that really, if we boil it down, if we want to be honest with ourselves, really, we're all just making it up as we go along anyway. We're all just making it up as we go. Think about it. As parents, okay, we made it up as we go. If you got kids, you're making it up as you go. You just are. We try to figure out with each kid, because each kid's very different, and what worked with this one doesn't work with this one. We're flying by the seat of our pants. We're making it up as we go. Now watch Jonathan's plan here. This has to be, without a doubt, one of the dumbest ideas in the entire Bible. This is a dumb idea. It's not a good idea. It really isn't. To go walking right into the enemy's camp, these two guys, how much sense does that make? That's a dumb idea. It's almost as dumb as Moses standing with a rod pointing at the Red Sea and the Red Sea parting. It's almost as dumb of an idea that Moses striking the rock and then water comes out of the rock. It's almost as dumb of an idea as David going into battle, a shepherd boy, never been in battle, didn't know anything about combat or conflict in an army situation. He's going to go in the battle against a giant, a Philistine giant, Goliath, and he's going armed with rocks. He's just going to chuck rocks at him. That's dumb. That's not a good plan. That's a dumb plan. It's just as dumb as Jesus trying to feed thousands of people with 2 fish and a couple loaves of bread. Not a good idea. It's almost as dumb as Noah building a big giant boat, and it hadn't even ever rained yet. Dumb idea, Noah. It's almost as dumb. See, this is a dumb idea. And listen, here's the thing. A lot of stuff that God did looked like dumb ideas, looked like a dumb decision to the people who were doing it. And that still happens today. God still asks us to do things that, I don't think that's a very good idea, God. That's how God works. But listen to how stupid this strategy is that Jonathan has. Jonathan says, come on then. We'll cross over toward them and let them see us. We're just going to walk up into their camp. Hey, how you doing, guys? We'll see how that goes. Now notice this. And throughout this entire thing, this entire episode, God's going to give Jonathan the victory, okay? But here's the thing to notice. God never says anything. He doesn't say a single word throughout this whole thing. The only people who speak are Jonathan, his assistant, and then his enemies coming up here. God doesn't say a word. Jonathan says, all right, Dad and his men, they're hiding out. They're scared. They're not going to do anything. The priest isn't doing anything. The guys that are in authority, the guys that are up front, the guys who are our leaders, they're not doing anything. What do we got to lose? Let's go walk over into the enemy camp. We'll go show ourselves to the enemy. Verse 9. If they say to us, wait here until we come to you, then we'll stay where we are and not go up to them. But if they say, come up to us, we will climb up, because that will be our sign that the Lord has given them into our hands. And just when it couldn't get any dumber, so both of them showed themselves to the Philistine outpost. Look, said the Philistines, the Hebrews are crawling out of their holes they were hiding in. The men of the outpost shouted to Jonathan and his armor bearer, You come on up to us and we'll teach you a lesson. So Jonathan said to his armor bearer, climb up after me. The Lord has given them into the hand of Israel. How can he talk about victory? The conflict hasn't even happened yet. He can do it because he can say, I know something that's greater than what I know with my mind. I know with my faith. Verse 13, Jonathan climbed up using his hands and feet with his armor bearer right behind him. The Philistines fell before Jonathan, and his armor bearer followed and killed behind him. Now, think about this. Slippery, thorny. It's so steep they're climbing up on their hands and feet. Physically, that's not a position that you want to be in that's going to be very successful as far as battle goes. I mean, you're not in a position to fight. You're not in a position to defend yourself. You're climbing up. I mean, this is a place where, you got to understand. Do you know how vulnerable they were? They were very vulnerable climbing up that slippery, thorny incline on their hands and feet. Now, as a side note, understand this. Victory requires vulnerability. This is true in anything. It's true in relationships. Sometimes we have to make ourselves vulnerable. We have to put ourselves out there and be vulnerable in order to have victory. It's true in a personal relationship. It's true in a marriage relationship. There's a certain amount of vulnerability that's there. Okay, verse 14. In the first attack, Jonathan and his armor bearer killed some 20 men in an area of about half an acre. All that because Jonathan said, hey, I got an idea. See, the value isn't in the idea. It's in the courage and the faith to act on the idea. People come up with ideas all the time. People say, well, I could have thought of that. Anyone can think of something, but to succeed, there's a lot more to it than just thinking of it and thinking about it. The hard part isn't thinking of it. It's not the thought that counts. The thing that in the text that kind of stands out isn't so much what Jonathan did, but it's what the people who were in charge, it was what the people who were the leaders who should have been leading, it's what they were doing, or rather maybe not doing. We're told that Saul was staying on the outskirts of town. He's under a pomegranate tree with 600 men. But it also says that the Lord's priest was there and he was wearing an ephod under the tree there with him. And that's important because an ephod, it was an instrument for seeking the will of God that they had. The ephod was a garment that they wore, that the priest wore, and it had a breastplate on it. And on that breastplate there was 12 stones, each stone one for each to represent each of the 12 tribes of Israel. And he would wear that breastplate whenever he would make atonement for the sins of the people. And there were specific instructions that were given about that breastplate. It's found in Exodus chapter 28. Whenever Aaron enters the holy place, he will bear the names of the sons of Israel over his heart on the breastplate of decision as a continuing memorial before the Lord. Also put the Urim and Thummim in the breastpiece, so they may be over Aaron's heart whenever he enters the presence of the Lord. Thus Aaron will always bear the means of making decisions for the Israelites over his heart before the Lord. Now, here's the thing about this. The Bible doesn't tell us exactly how this all worked. We don't really know. We're not quite sure of the exact details, but we do know that this was one of the ways that God would reveal his will to the people concerning the nation of Israel. Now, this Urim and Thummim, again, we're not sure exactly of the details of this. Some think it might have been some kind of stick, but most people think it was some type of stones. And one would represent yes, the other would represent no. And they would inquire of God, a yes/no question of God. And it's believed, most widely accepted, that most likely when they inquired of God, one of the stones would begin to glow for the answer that God would get to give them direction. Again, we don't know exact details. That's probably the most widely accepted. Theologians and people that are way, way smarter than me, that's kind of what we think. But anyway, What we do know is that it says that Aaron had with him the means of making a decision. We all have means of making decisions, a way of trying to figure it out. But sometimes God wouldn't answer through the breastplate. And when he wouldn't answer and they would ask a question and nothing would happen and he wouldn't answer, that meant maybe. Kind of like the old grade school note that the girl or the guy little boy would pass to the little girl. Do you love me? Check yes, check no, check maybe. So that brings us to this question. What do we do with the maybe? I mean, I'm thinking, how cool would it be to have a stones that would light up to give us direction? God, should I take this job? I got a pretty good job now, but this is a better job. It pays more, but it's going to require more of me. It's going to take more time, and it's going to mean more time away from my family and all those kind of things. I'm trying to weigh that out. God, light those stones up. Light one of them up. Tell me, what should I do? And I got to be honest, for me, even if he gave me the stones that would light up, I'm not really sure. I'm not sure I'd have the faith to do it. I'm not sure. Because the truth is, even sometimes when we do know what God is telling us to do, when we do know that this is God, and I know that this is God moving me in this direction, it's still not easy to do it. Here they had this breastplate, they had these stones, they had the ability to know what to do, but they were sitting on it. They didn't do anything with it. Their fear and their complacency had put them in that place. Because when we have the instruments but don't use them, I mean, how can God speak to us when we don't even know where our Bible is from one Sunday to the next? Jonathan said, hey man, we don't have an ephod. We don't have complete clarity in this situation. We don't. But what he did have that was so important was he had the right person to turn to and to talk to about it. And we need to understand the value of not only what God says to us, but also we need to understand the value in who we say it to after God says it to us. The right people will give us encouragement. They will give us the go-ahead. Hey, that's a great idea. I think God's moving you in that direction. I think that's right. I'll help you. I'll pray for you. I'll encourage you. Let's go ahead. Let's do this thing. I know it sounds impossible. I know it sounds like you can't do it, but let's step out on faith and do it. It's a step of faith. And sometimes they'll say, that ain't God at all. So see, we're back to that 50-50 thing again. It's not just our relationship with God, but it's also our relationship with others. Listen, many people suffer in silence in their relationship with God because we're living in bitterness in our relationship to others. If Jonathan would have had an armor bearer that he said, hey, here's my idea. Here's what I think we should do. We're going to go up there and we're going to go walk into the Philistine camp. Let's go do that. What do you think? If he'd have had an armor bearer that said, you know what, listen, man, I'm thinking I'm out on this one. I mean, I'm big time out on this one. I'm thinking maybe, I tell you what, you go ahead and I'm going to stay here and pray for you, and you go ahead and do that, and let me know how it turns out. If he would have said that, I promise, the battle wouldn't have went like it did that day. And listen, let me just throw this disclaimer in. Hearing a message like this doesn't mean go out and do the dumbest thing you can think of. Okay? That's not what we're saying. Okay? It's always a 50-50 thing. On the one hand, I'm confident, but on the other hand, I'm not 100% certain. It's a 50-50 faith. It's a divine partnership. One where Jonathan says, there's something that God can do, but then there's something that God will not do that only we can do. James explains it this way. He simply says, faith without works is dead. It takes both. It takes both. It takes two. It's a 50-50 proposition. I mean, think about it. Why would God do for us what he gave us the strength to do ourselves? It's a 50-50 faith. There's God's part and there's our part. We do our part, God does his part. Well, I don't know if I can do that, but you know what? It'll be a big step of faith for me to do that, but I'm going to step out in faith and do it. And we step out in faith and we do it, and that's our part. And then God meets us there and does his part. Jonathan said, perhaps the Lord will 50-50. Maybe he will, maybe he won't. I know he can, and I think that he will. I know God is with me, and I think this is where he's leading me. Listen, know this. God won't reveal truth if we're not willing to move forward in it. If we're not willing to move toward it. Jonathan said, look, here's the deal. We're just going to have to put ourselves out there and see what happens. We'll put ourselves out there. We'll show ourselves to the Philistines. We'll walk into their camp, and we'll see if God will. I like how the Message Bible says it. It says, Jonathan said to his armor bearer, come on now, let's go across to these uncircumcised pagans. Maybe God will work for us. There's no rule that says God can only deliver by using a big army. No one can stop God from saving when he sets his mind to it. See, here's the thing this morning. Faith is being able to move on a maybe. You know what that means? It means it's 50-50. Might not work, but always remember that God is working. Now, I'm confident of the second. I'm confident that God is always working, even when I'm not certain of the first. It takes faith to say, maybe if I'll do this, maybe if I'll take this step, maybe if I'll move in this direction, maybe it will, maybe it won't. Maybe this thing that I think I'm supposed to do, I'll step in that direction, and then maybe that'll lead to the thing that I was really supposed to do. And even if the first thing fails, at least I'm not sitting still, not sitting in fear. It takes faith to move on a maybe. God says, move toward it. Yeah, it might work, but even if it doesn't, God says, I will work. It's the power to move on a maybe, to know that God is a mystery, but his character is still trustworthy. We can move on a maybe. Remember Jesus? He's in the Garden of Gethsemane. He's praying to the Father. He knows what's coming. He knows he's going to have to go to the cross and all that that's going to entail, and he's going to have to endure it, and it's going to be terrible, and it's going to be a nightmare for him. And he says, God, I don't want to do this. Father, I don't want to do it. Is there any other way? Is there any other option? Is there any other way that we can do this? And then he comes to the conclusion. He says, you know what? Not my will, Father, but yours be done. So I'm going to go see about this, and maybe I've got a maybe faith. Enough faith to do it and not know the conclusion, but to trust God in the process. It's a maybe faith. I'm not certain 100%, but I am confident. And we find ourselves many times in our life in a maybe moment. Some of us here today, undoubtedly, there are some here today, right now, it's a maybe moment for you. I know who God is, and I know that nothing can stop him, but it's 50-50. See, the miracle is in the maybe. God lives in a place called maybe. So if you're in a maybe moment today, that's where God lives. When you're in that maybe moment, and if you are, you know it, and maybe you're not today, that's okay. you're going to need this message somewhere down the line, because in your coming weeks, you're going to find yourself in a maybe moment, because life is full of them. Life is full of maybe moments. And you will feel, when you're in that maybe moment, the coexistence of uncertainty on the one hand and confidence in the Lord on the other. And you feel like you're making it up as you go along. Jonathan said, climb up after me. We'll climb up the side of this slippery, thorny slope. They were making it up. They were making it up as they went. Maybe moments. Listen, maybe moments are moments in which we're vulnerable. Maybe moments are moments when, I could look stupid. Building an ark. How stupid do I look? Maybe moments are moments when we can be rejected. Maybe moments are tough. Now, most of us aren't facing Philistines and thorny, slippery cliffs. Most of us are facing things that are on the inside of us. Things that seem insurmountable on the inside of us. In the maybe moment of your life, the question is, will you move forward anyway? Are you in a maybe moment? Slippery on one side, thorny on the other. Maybe you feel like, I don't have anyone. Everyone that I thought would be with me is not with me. If that's you today, I want to pray for you. Would you bow your heads? Heavenly Father, I pray today for the faith of your people, God, to step out, to move forward on a maybe. Well, I think God's moving me in this direction. I think God would have me do this, but I'm not sure. Maybe he's going to use me here. Maybe, I don't know. Help us to have faith to move forward on a maybe. God, you're the God of all wisdom. God, you see all. You know all. You can do anything. God, I thank you that ministry is birthed out of maybe. God, I speak over every maybe situation here today, God. Give your people the kind of faith that it takes to move forward on a maybe. Father, we thank you that if it's 100%, if we're 100% certain, God, it doesn't take faith. And so, Lord, even though we're not 100% certain, God, we're confident that you are with us. So, Lord, as those who are here in a maybe situation, God, help us to be able to step out in faith and say, okay, God, I'm going to step out on a maybe. God will take our maybes. So, Father, I just ask that you would do that. That God, maybe there's a dream, maybe there's something that God placed in someone's heart here today a long time ago, and you've given up on that. You thought it was God. Well, maybe this is God, maybe it isn't. Lord, would you bring that back up? God, resurrect that in their life. Well, I always thought God would use me in this thing, but I don't know. I just couldn't step forward in it. And maybe he could still do that. Yeah. So, Lord, whatever the situation, God, you know what it is. God, would you move forward? Lord, help us to step out and move forward on a maybe. God, I thank you for it. Would you all stand? Father, thank you that you love us. God, as we do our part, you will meet us halfway, 50-50. As we step out in faith and do our part, God, you will do your part. And God, you will use us for your kingdom to accomplish things for you. And we thank you for it.
is crowned in glory now. Savior knelt to wash our feet. Now at his feet we bow. One who wore our sin and shame, now robed in majesty, radiance of perfect love, now shines for